I knew the merger was doomed from the moment Henry Calloway stood on stage and announced it like a victory parade. I was in the audience, clutching the report I'd stayed up all night refining, the one that proved the numbers wouldn't hold. They didn't just ignore my warning, they erased it. The slide I'd built was removed last minute, my risks condensed into a single dismissive line. Further review required. The applause was deafening, but all I heard was the thud of betrayal. My name is Martha Carr, and this is the story of how being underestimated became my greatest advantage. At first, it wasn't rage that drove me, it was humiliation. Henry loved making examples out of people, and I became his favorite target. A detail person, overly cautious, not strategic enough. Every comment felt like a tap on the bruise he'd created in front of the whole company. But humiliation has a half-life, and mine decayed into clarity. I began documenting everything he ignored, the altered projections, the unrealistic timelines, the risk he buried under glossy optimism. I didn't lash out. I didn't argue. I simply watched, listened, and built an archive he didn't know existed. When the merger started cracking, it didn't break quietly, it detonated. Employees panicked. Investors circled like vultures. And Henry, the man who once performed confidence like theater, began hiding behind buzzwords and frantic emails. Suddenly, the same board members who'd nodded politely at my warnings were forwarding me frantic messages asking for context and clarification. I kept my answers clean, calm, and ruthlessly precise. They had ignored me when I raised my hand. Now they listened, because the fire was licking their heels. My revenge wasn't a moment, it was a strategy. A slow, methodical unraveling of the lies that propped up the merger, each revelation timed, each move deliberate. It wasn't about punishing Henry. It was about exposing the truth in a way that left no room for spin or excuses. In the end, he wasn't undone by me. He was undone by the arrogance that convinced him he could silence me forever. When the board turned to me, the woman he sidelined and dismissed, to lead the stabilization effort, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady, whole, and I walked away knowing this. When you know your worth, you don't need revenge to be loud. You just need it to be right. The lights hit the stage, and there he was. Henry Calloway, our CEO, beaming like he'd invented progress itself. On the giant screen behind him, the slide I'd worked on for weeks appeared, except it wasn't mine. Mine had warnings. Mine had numbers that mattered. This one was a glossy, empty promise wrapped in corporate speak and false confidence. My chest locked up. My vision blurred at the edges. I gripped the armrest of my chair so hard my knuckles went white. Around me, people were nodding, smiling, applauding like trained seals. They didn't see what I saw. They didn't know what had been removed. Then I saw her. Diane, my boss, sitting 3 rows ahead. She turned slightly, just enough for our eyes to meet. Her expression wasn't neutral. It was smug. Arms crossed, chin lifted, like she'd just delivered a final blow and wanted to watch me absorb it. I sat frozen, humiliated in front of the entire company. 500 employees packed into this auditorium, all celebrating a merger I knew would fail. And the woman who was supposed to support me had just thrown me under the bus without saying a word. My name is Martha Carr, and at that moment, I understood they'd erased me on purpose. This wasn't an oversight or miscommunication. This was deliberate. They'd taken my work, gutted it of truth, and presented the skeleton as innovation. Hours earlier, I'd been reviewing the final deck for the big announcement. My slide, the one showing the impending cash shortfall, was gone. Just gone. In its place was a cheerful graph showing projected revenue growth that defied basic math. I'd rushed to Diane's desk, my heart pounding. She was typing something on her phone, barely glancing up when I approached. Her office smelled like expensive perfume and cold ambition. "The projections slide," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's not on the deck." She didn't even look up when she said it. Leadership wanted something more positive. Positive, not truthful, not accurate, positive. I stood there, searching for words that wouldn't get me fired on the spot. But the numbers I showed are based on actual data. The cash flow analysis shows we'll hit problems by Q3. "Martha," she finally looked at me, her expression flat. "Henry knows what he's doing. He doesn't need you second-guessing him in front of the board." My throat burned as I walked away, pretending to accept it. But inside, something shifted. Something cold and calculating clicked into place. They weren't just dismissing my concerns. They were actively choosing lies over truth. In the hallway, waiting for the elevator after leaving Diane's office, I heard two coworkers snicker behind me. I recognized their voices immediately. Kyle from marketing and Amanda from operations. "Martha freaks out about everything," Kyle said, not bothering to lower his voice. "I know, right? Henry said she's too cautious during the leadership meeting last week," Amanda replied. "Said she can't see the big picture." My skin prickled. The elevator doors opened, but I didn't move. I just stood there, frozen, as they walked past me, still laughing. They didn't even notice I'd heard every word. Henry wasn't just sidelining me. He was actively rewriting my reputation behind my back, poisoning the well, making sure that when things went wrong, nobody would remember I'd warned them. They'd only remember that Martha Carr was too cautious and couldn't see the big picture. I stepped into the elevator alone, my reflection staring back at me in the polished metal doors. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from fury. The kind that burns cold and steady, the kind that doesn't explode. It calculates. During the final rehearsal that afternoon, I made one last attempt. We were all gathered in the conference room, watching Henry practice his delivery. He was smooth, charismatic, hitting every beat like he'd rehearsed it 1,000 times. When he finished, there was a pause for feedback. I raised my hand carefully. "I have a concern about the timeline on slide 12. Diane cut me off with a laugh before I could continue. "Martha loves her spreadsheets," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Everyone chuckled. Even Henry smiled, that politician's smile that never reached his eyes. "We've got this covered, Martha," he said, dismissing me with a wave. "Trust the process." My jaw stayed clenched through the rest of the meeting. Shame buzzed under my skin like static electricity. I'd spent 12 years at this company. 12 years building credibility, earning respect. Proving myself in a male-dominated finance department. And in one sentence, Diane had reduced me to a joke. I didn't speak again during the rehearsal. I just sat there, taking notes, documenting every rosy projection and unrealistic assumption they were about to present as fact. If they wanted to ignore me, fine, but I wouldn't let them erase what I knew. After the announcement, everyone gathered in the common area. The company had brought in catering, champagne, and the whole celebration package. People were congratulating each other like they'd personally accomplished something historic. Henry raised his glass, his voice booming across the room. "To everyone who believed in the vision, who understood that sometimes you have to be bold to win big." His eyes landed on me for half a second. Cold, dismissive, a look that said I didn't belong in the category of believers. Then he turned away, already moving on to shake hands with someone more important. Someone patted my arm, Trevor from accounting. "Better luck next time," he said, like I'd just lost a game instead of been systematically excluded from a major business decision. I held back tears all the way to my car. The parking garage was empty and echoing. I sat behind the wheel for 20 minutes, just breathing, fighting to keep my composure. I'd worked on that merger analysis for 3 months. 3 months of late nights, detailed modeling, risk assessment, and they'd compressed my warnings into a footnote, then deleted even that. When I finally started the engine, something had changed. I wasn't sad anymore. I was focused. At my desk the next morning, Diane pulled me aside. Her voice was soft, almost gentle. The tone people use when they're about to deliver bad news disguised as advice. "Martha, I need to talk to you about something." She guided me into an empty conference room, closing the door behind us. "You're too blunt with data," she said, settling into a chair across from me. "Henry needs support, not skepticism. You're making people uncomfortable with all these worst-case scenarios." Support meant silence. Skepticism meant doing my job. "I'm just presenting the numbers as they are," I said carefully. "That's the problem. You're presenting obstacles instead of solutions. Henry's trying to build momentum, and you're throwing up roadblocks." She leaned forward, her expression sympathetic. I'm telling you this because I want to see you succeed here, but you need to adjust your approach. I nodded, but something in me hardened. She wasn't helping me. She was training me to be complicit, to smile and nod while the company drove off a cliff. I understand, I said. Another lie I understood perfectly, just not the way she meant. Late one night, after everyone had left, I stayed behind. The office was eerily quiet, just the hum of computers and the distant sound of the cleaning crew on another floor. I opened the shared drive where we kept all the merger documents. Someone had changed the projections. Revenue inflated by nearly 30%. Operating costs trimmed unrealistically. The debt service calculations were completely wrong, assuming interest rates that didn't exist in reality. My heart thudded against my ribs. This wasn't an oversight. This was intentional manipulation. Someone had taken my original analysis and systematically altered every number that showed risk. I pulled up the version history. The changes had been made 2 days ago, at 11:47 p.m., by Diane's login credentials. I sat back in my chair, the glow of the monitor illuminating my face in the dark office. This was it. This was proof that they weren't just dismissing my concerns. They were actively falsifying data to hide them. I downloaded everything. The original files, the altered versions, the complete version history. I saved it all to an encrypted drive I kept in my bag. Evidence, insurance, ammunition. Digging deeper that same night, I found something worse. A message thread in the executive communication system between Diane and Henry. I shouldn't have had access, but it had granted me elevated permissions months ago for a special project and never revoked them. She'll push back on the projections, Diane had written 3 weeks ago. Henry's response made my blood run cold. Then we cut her input. This needs to be a clean narrative, no doomsday scenarios. Another message from Diane. What if she goes to the board? Henry, she won't. She's too worried about her job, and if she does, we'll handle it. Cut her input. Cut her. My stomach twisted, but my hands stayed steady as I screenshot every message. They'd planned this. They'd known I would object, and they'd strategized around me like I was an obstacle instead of a colleague trying to help. I forwarded everything to my personal email, then cleared my tracks. When I finally left the office at 2 a.m., I felt different, not defeated, armed. The next morning, I was reviewing documents when Marcus appeared at my desk. Marcus worked in legal, quiet and methodical, the kind of person everyone overlooked because he never made noise. He was staring at my computer screen, his face pale. That's not the version I approved, he whispered. I minimized the window quickly, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. What do you mean? The merger agreement, the payment terms, that's not what I signed off on. His voice was urgent, barely audible. Someone changed the contingency clauses after legal review. My pulse quickened. Do you still have the original version? He nodded. In my secure files. They can't access those without my permission. Can you send them to me? Marcus hesitated, then pulled out his phone. Not through company email. Give me your personal address. 10 minutes later, I had his original notes. They directly contradicted the announcement version. The payment structure was completely different, loaded with penalties and contingencies that put our company at massive risk. For the first time in days, I didn't feel alone. Someone else saw the truth too. During the board tour 2 weeks after the announcement, everything started unraveling. The board members walked through our offices, shaking hands, observing the integration planning meetings. Henry was in full performance mode, confident and commanding. Then Alex, one of the junior analysts on my team, made a mistake. Or maybe it wasn't a mistake. Maybe he'd finally had enough of the lies too. During the presentation, he blurted out, "But this doesn't include the transition costs for the legacy systems." The room went silent. Henry's jaw tightened visibly. Deanne went pale, her coffee cup frozen halfway to her mouth. One of the board members, a sharp woman named Patricia Burns, turned to me. "Is that correct, Martha?" Everyone turned. Henry's eyes were burning holes in my skull. Diane looked like she might be sick, but Patricia was waiting, and she wasn't the type to accept corporate doublespeak. I stepped forward, my voice steady. Yes, and I can show you the full version of the analysis if you'd like to see it. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Henry tried to recover, started talking about preliminary numbers and ongoing refinement, but Patricia held up her hand. I'd like to see Martha's analysis, today. That evening, Patricia emailed me directly. Not through Diane, not through Henry, directly. Martha, would you mind sending your detailed analysis? I want to understand your concerns fully. Please include any documentation you think is relevant. My fingers trembled as I typed my reply. This was it. The moment I'd been waiting for without knowing I was waiting for it. Someone with actual power finally wanted the truth. I attached everything. The original projections, the altered versions, the message thread between Diane and Henry, Marcus's legal notes showing the changed contract terms. I organized it clearly, methodically, letting the facts speak for themselves. Before I hit send, I paused. This would blow up my career. Henry would know I'd gone around him. Diane would never forgive me. I'd be branded a troublemaker, disloyal, a career killer. But Ethan's face flashed in my mind. No, not Ethan. Alex. Alex from my team, who'd risked his job by speaking up. And all the other employees who'd be hurt when this merger collapsed because leadership chose ego over reality. I hit send. Then I sat back and waited for the explosion. The next morning, Henry called me into his office. His smile was perfectly calibrated, warm, congratulatory, completely fake. Martha, I've been thinking about your contributions to this merger. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. I want to offer you a new role, integration support lead. It sounded impressive. It was anything but. You'd be responsible for coordinating between departments, making sure information flows smoothly, handling the detail work that makes everything run. He leaned back, fingers steepled. Reporting directly to Diane, of course. No resources, no authority, no decision-making power, just a title, a leash disguised as a promotion. He wanted to keep me close, keep me busy, keep me quiet. That's very generous, I said, matching his fake smile with my own. I knew you'd see it as an opportunity. His eyes were cold despite the smile. Some people might see this situation as contentious, but I think we can work together productively. Don't you? Absolutely, I lied. I accepted with a handshake that felt like touching something dead. But behind my ribs, something calculated lit up. This new role gave me something Henry hadn't considered. Access. To files, meetings, and conversations I wouldn't normally see. He thought he was caging me. He'd actually just given me the keys. My new role came with new permissions in the company systems. Integration meant I needed access to everything. Financial records, contract details, integration timelines, executive communications. Henry had signed off on it himself, too arrogant to see the trap he'd set for himself. I spent a weekend diving deep. In a folder marked executive compensation, I found something that explained everything. A bonus structure tied to the merger's first-year performance metrics. If certain targets were hit, on paper, Henry and the senior leadership team would receive payouts worth millions. The targets were completely unrealistic. The only way to achieve them was to manipulate the numbers. And there, buried in the contract language, was a clause that rewarded the acquired company massively if those short-term goals appeared to be met, even if they collapsed later. My breath caught. This explained everything. Henry wasn't incompetent. He was corrupt. He'd structured the merger to generate a massive payday for himself and his friends, even if it destroyed the company afterward. He'd get his bonus, the other company would get their payout, and everyone else would be left with the wreckage. I saved everything to my encrypted drive. This wasn't just bad judgment anymore. This was fraud. I rebuilt the entire financial model honestly. No inflated projections. No hidden costs swept under rugs. No magical thinking. Just reality, brutal and clear. The company was 12 weeks from a serious cash crunch, maybe less. We couldn't make payroll and debt payments simultaneously past October. The merger had over-leveraged us at exactly the wrong time. People would lose their jobs. Projects would be canceled. The company might not survive. And the only way Henry could hide it was by continuing to manipulate the numbers until the bonuses paid out and he could disappear with his money. My hands shook as I saved the file. This wasn't just about proving I was right anymore. People's livelihoods were at stake. Families, careers, the integrity of a company that employed nearly 2,000 people. I sent the revised model to Patricia Burns with a simple message. This is what the next 6 months actually look like if current trends continue. She responded in under an hour. We need to meet. Diane found me in the stairwell the next afternoon. I'd gone there to clear my head, to escape the suffocating air of the office where everyone was starting to sense something was wrong. She looked exhausted. The polished veneer was cracking. Martha, we need to talk. About what? You need to let this go. Her voice was quiet, almost pleading. You're making things harder for everyone. I'm trying to prevent a disaster. By undermining Henry, by going to the board behind his back, she rubbed her temples. You don't understand the pressure he's under, the expectations. I understand he pushed false projections. She flinched. For a moment, I saw something like guilt flicker across her face. He said the numbers were just PR, that the reality would catch up once momentum built. That's not how finance works, Diane. I know, her voice cracked slightly. I know, but he promised if I supported him on this, he'd make me CFO when the merger stabilized. I've been waiting for that role for 8 years, Martha. 8 years. So that was it. She'd sold out for a promotion, for a title that might never come because the company might not exist long enough to give it to her. I reached out to one of the major investors 2 days later. His name was Thomas Whitmore, and I'd met him briefly at a shareholder meeting 6 months ago. He'd seemed sharp, detail-oriented, the kind of person who actually read financial statements instead of just glancing at executive summaries. We met at a coffee shop downtown, neutral territory. I brought printed copies of everything, the original analysis, the altered projections, the bonus structure, the revised model showing the cash crunch. He read through it methodically, his expression never changing. When he finished, he set the papers down carefully and looked at me with steady, calculating eyes. You understand what you're doing here? Yes. If you're wrong, your career is over. I'm not wrong. The numbers don't lie. He studied me for a long moment. Fix this quietly. Keep me updated. I'll back you with the board if necessary. It wasn't friendship. It wasn't even really support. It was leverage. He had millions invested in the company, and I'd just shown him his money was at risk. He needed me as much as I needed him. But I'd take it. I'd take any advantage I could get at this point. With Thomas's weight behind me, I approached Patricia with a carefully worded suggestion. Not an accusation, not a demand, just a reasonable proposal. Given the complexity of this merger, would the board consider an independent financial review, just to validate our assumptions and timelines? She looked surprised, then thoughtful. Patricia was smart enough to read between the lines. She knew what I was really saying. There's something wrong here, and we need outside eyes to confirm it. That's an interesting idea, she said slowly. It would certainly give everyone confidence in our projections. She brought it up in the next board meeting. I wasn't there, but Marcus told me later that the room had erupted in debate. Henry fought it hard, calling it an unnecessary expense and a vote of no confidence in leadership. But 3 other board members supported Patricia. The vote passed 6-3. An independent audit firm would review the merger financials and provide a report within 4 weeks. Henry looked like someone had yanked the floor out from under him. Diane called in sick the next day, and I sat at my desk, calm and focused, knowing the timer had just started ticking. 2 weeks into the audit, a memo leaked to the press. Someone had sent a reporter detailed information about the questionable projections and the bonus structure tied to manipulated metrics. The story broke on a Thursday morning, and by lunchtime, the entire building was buzzing with panic. Diane cornered me by the coffee machine, her eyes wild. "Did you do this?" "No." "Don't lie to me, Martha." "I'm not lying. I didn't leak anything to the press." It was technically true. I'd given information to the board and to Thomas, but not to any reporters. She searched my face, looking for tells, for guilt, for anything she could use. But I'd learned to control my expression over the past few months. I gave her nothing. "Henry thinks it was you," she said finally. "Henry thinks a lot of things that aren't true." Someone else had leaked it. Maybe Marcus. Maybe someone on the audit team. Maybe another executive who'd finally grown a conscience. I didn't know and didn't care. The truth was out, and that was all that mattered. Henry tried to fight back by limiting my access to certain files. He sent it a request to revoke my integration permissions, claiming they were no longer necessary for my current responsibilities. But I'd already backed up everything. Every document, every email, every altered spreadsheet. He could lock me out of the systems, but he couldn't erase what I'd already collected. He sent me a private email that afternoon, trying to intimidate me into silence. "Your behavior is undermining company morale and creating unnecessary panic among the staff. I need team players right now, not people spreading fear and doubt." I forwarded his email to Patricia without adding any commentary. I didn't need to. The message spoke for itself, a CEO trying to silence legitimate concerns by framing them as disloyalty. She responded within minutes. "Thank you for keeping me informed." Henry's power was eroding, slowly, methodically, inevitably, and he could feel it slipping away with every passing day. During a tense team meeting the following week, Diane publicly distanced herself from me. Someone asked about the press leak, and she made a show of looking uncomfortable. "I can't confirm or deny Martha's concerns about the projections," she said carefully. "Those decisions were made at levels above my involvement." My chest caved in. After everything, she was still protecting herself, still throwing me under the bus to save her own career. But that night, something unexpected happened. I came home to find a manila envelope slipped under my apartment door. No return address. No note, just printed emails inside. They showed Henry approving numbers he knew were inaccurate. Messages where he explicitly told Diane to massage the projections and make it look better than it is. Instructions to hide certain costs and inflate certain revenues. It took me a moment to understand. Diane had sent these. Her public denial wasn't betrayal. It was protection. She was covering herself while simultaneously giving me the ammunition I needed to finish this. She'd finally chosen a side. Late, but not too late. I assembled everything into a single document. Comprehensive, irrefutable, damning. The original merger analysis I'd prepared. The altered versions showing who changed what and when. The message threads proving Henry and Diane knew the numbers were false. Marcus's legal notes showing contract terms had been modified after approval. The bonus structure revealing Henry's financial incentive to commit fraud. My revised model showing the impending cash crisis. And now, Diane's emails proving Henry had explicitly ordered the manipulation. I handed copies to 3 board members. Patricia, Thomas's representative, and another investor named Kenneth who'd been asking increasingly pointed questions during recent calls. They read through everything in Patricia's office while I waited. The silence stretched for nearly an hour. Finally, Patricia looked up, her face drained of color. "This is worse than anyone thought." Kenneth nodded slowly. "We need to call an emergency board meeting." "How soon can we do that?" Patricia asked. "Tomorrow morning. I'll make the calls." They didn't ask if I was sure. They didn't question my motives. The evidence was too clear, too comprehensive, too devastating to deny. Henry made one last desperate attempt to save himself. He tried to bribe Kenneth with an unofficial consulting role, a position that would pay 6 figures for minimal work, essentially a payoff to secure his vote. Kenneth refused. Then he reported the bribe attempt to the rest of the board. That changed everything. It wasn't just about bad projections anymore. It was about corruption, about a CEO willing to pay for loyalty, about an executive so desperate to hide his mistakes that he'd crossed ethical and possibly legal lines. The room shifted. I could feel it from my desk 2 floors below. The mood in the executive suite changed from defensive to hostile. People started avoiding Henry in the hallways. Diane stopped attending his meetings. The administrative assistants whispered in corners. Everyone could feel it. The end was coming, and no amount of charm or manipulation could stop it now. The emergency board meeting happened on a Friday morning. They asked me to attend, not as an observer, but as a witness. Henry was there too, walking in with the confidence of someone who still thought he could talk his way out of anything. He came in loud, defensive, spinning stories, talking about vision and risk-taking and how you can't make bold moves without accepting some uncertainty. He blamed the audit firm for not understanding the industry. He blamed the press for sensationalizing normal business practices. He even tried to blame me for being too rigid and not understanding strategic thinking. Then they asked me to present my findings. I stood up, connected my laptop to the projector, and showed them everything, methodically, calmly, letting the facts speak louder than any emotion could. The manipulated spreadsheets with tracked changes showing exactly what had been altered. The messages proving he knew the numbers were false. The bonus structure revealing his financial incentive. The revised model showing the cash crisis we were headed toward. And the attempt to bribe Kenneth into silence. Henry's voice cracked halfway through his rebuttal. He stammered, grasping for explanations that sounded increasingly desperate. Patricia's expression never changed, cool, analytical, unforgiving. When I finished, they asked Henry to step outside. He stood slowly, looking around the room like he couldn't believe this was happening. The board asked him to leave, and he did, his shoulders slumped. He didn't come back in. 20 minutes later, Patricia emerged and told me he'd been removed from his role, pending investigation. Henry walked past my desk that afternoon, slowly, like he was moving through water. Stunned, like the world had betrayed him instead of the other way around. Our eyes met for a second. I didn't gloat, didn't smile, just watched him process the consequences of his own choices. Diane sat in her office with her head in her hands when I passed by later. We didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. She'd made her choices too, protecting Henry, manipulating data, prioritizing her promotion over integrity. The fact that she'd helped me in the end didn't erase the months she'd spent enabling him. The truth had spoken for both of us. It had judged us both, and only one of us could live with the verdict. The office was eerily quiet that evening. People packed up quickly, avoiding eye contact, processing what had happened. A CEO had been removed. The company's future was uncertain, but at least now we were dealing with reality instead of lies. The board asked me to lead the stabilization effort on Monday morning. Not permanently, they were clear about that, but for the next 6 months, I'd be responsible for fixing the mess Henry had created. "We need someone who understands the real numbers," Patricia said. "Someone who won't sugarcoat the situation. Can you do it?" "Yes," I said, "on one condition." She raised an eyebrow. "Full transparency in every future financial review. No more altered projections. No more hiding bad news. If we're going to fix this, we do it honestly." She smiled slightly. "Agreed." People thanked me quietly in the hallways over the following days. Small gestures, a nod, a whispered thank you. A coffee left on my desk from someone who didn't leave a name. My inbox filled with notes from coworkers I barely knew, expressing relief that someone had finally told the truth. I accepted the new role without celebration. This wasn't a victory. It was just the beginning of hard work, restructuring debt, renegotiating contracts, rebuilding trust with investors and employees. But as I walked out that first evening as acting financial officer, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not triumph, not vindication, just steadiness, wholeness. I hadn't burned anything down. I just turned the lights on. And in the harsh glare of truth, the lies couldn't survive. Henry had tried to erase me, to silence me, to make me small. But he'd forgotten something fundamental. You can't erase the truth just because it's inconvenient. Eventually, reality wins, and the people who bet against it always lose. I drove home that night with the windows down, breathing in the cool evening air, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. The humiliation, the documentation, the patient accumulation of evidence, the careful timing of revelations. Some people might call what I did revenge. Maybe it was, but it was also justice, the slow, methodical kind that doesn't make headlines until it's already won. And as I pulled into my driveway and sat in the quiet darkness of my car, I realized something simple and powerful. When you know your worth, you don't need revenge to be loud. You just need it to be right. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to this channel for more amazing stories like this.